Um, Hello, good Nasser Smith Tshuva. Hope everyone had a good Rosh Hashanah. Thank you for having me. I am hopeful that with this sip of Torah, we'll hopefully be more prepared to have a Tshuva Shlima, a complete Tshuva, and be able to capitalize on everything that's within the Aseret Smith Tshuva and Yom Kippur coming up ahead. I want to thank several people for coming. First, I want to thank my father for being here in person and helping with the setup. I want to thank my mother for coming on, as always. I'm not sure if my grandma's on, but I know she was trying to get on. I guess she's coming on as well, and she's on the phone. I want to thank my chaver Gedalia Fox from the 5 Towns for joining on the phone as well. It's a big cover that Gedalia thought worthy enough to listen in for today's Torah, so thank you for joining. And I want to thank all of you for joining as well, as always. So the topic I wanted to discuss is called Eminem's Tshuva. Now, probably we're not all familiar with the person Eminem, but he was a recording artist around the 2000s, and he wrote a song in which he describes his personal tshuva. He actually was Jewish, and he's describing his personal process for growth and development. And I thought this would... That's what I've heard.
Okay.
So I wanted to hopefully take a look and see a little bit what he said. Not to say that everything he did is a complete tshuva and everything is on point, but we are going to see that he has a lot of very salient points with his tshuva, and this is going to, and then hopefully it'll be Mosif will add on a few other points that maybe he could add on to and improve upon, and hopefully with this we'll enhance our own thinking about different aspects of tshuva, and we'll be able to achieve a tshuva shlema. Would you mind sitting over to the side, please? Okay, so I'm not sure if this ended up getting shared around, but I typed up in a linear format Eminem's song. It's called Not Afraid, and I want to read what he... Yeah, you're welcome to share it on the screen. I'll read it line by line first, and then we'll analyze it. Okay, so again, the song is called Not Afraid, and this is what he has to say. The chorus is as follows. I'm not afraid to take a stand. Take a stand. Everybody. So just walk this road together. Through the storm. In any weather, cold or warm. I'm not alone. That's the chorus, and then the body is as follows. And I just can't keep living this way. So starting today, I'm breaking out of this cage. I'm standing up. I'm going to face my demons. I'm manning up. I'm going to hold my ground. I've had enough. It's time to put my life back together right now. It was my decision to come clean. I did it for me. Okay, so thank you. You can take off the screen share. So, before we start to analyze Eminem's Tshuva, I'd like to hear from any of you if you have any comments. Anyone watching on Zoom, or my dad, or Gedalia, if you have any comments so far about Eminem's approach to Tshuva, what steps he's taking to turn his life around, I'd be happy to hear as we begin.
He's going to face his demons, which I imagine for someone like him were quite intense with intoxicating substances.
Right, I didn't look into exactly what it is, but it sounds like when he's talking about decision to come clean, it sounds like he's probably talking about some sort of substances. Right, faces demons, that's...
So he's facing his demons and not going to take it. So that's a
One second, Gedalia.
Very hard. You have to be honest. Does your friend want to zoom in with us? I mean,
Yeah, it's very complicated to call in. I just told him to call me on phone. Gedalia, do you have any comments? Okay, so my Chaver Gedalia, he just suggested that when Eminem says that he's going to do it for myself, it's because he himself came to a recognition that this is not the way in the derech that he wants to continue to live his life. And we're going to expand on this topic. Do we have any comments before we begin the analysis?
Well, he also said that he's not alone. It kind of indicates maybe he found God and a way out from his problem.
You're saying that maybe he found God?
Yeah, actually, Josh pointed out, you saw it in the museum, he was big, druggy, like, many rap artists are, and so he's going to rehab, and we know that people go to rehab, they go in, they come out, they go in, they come out. If they go in because somebody put them there or something, like his Matthew says, you gotta go to rehab. It actually doesn't work. If you do it for yourself, if you're going in because you really need to go to rehab, he's not alone with some people in rehab. And if he's finally saying, I'm going to really unload my, I'm going to really do the work this time, not just go through the motions because the court appointed or because somebody told me to, but I've got to do it myself. So that's basically what Eminem's talking about.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fistel. That he asked, he's doing it for himself, not because anyone else is coercing him or pressuring him, but because he realizes that this is the path that he wants to live on. Okay, and I want to clarify, Mrs. Rudenstein, you were suggesting that Eminem, when he said, I'm not alone, that means he felt that he found God?
Right, it's okay.
Okay, so we'll definitely speak about this topic as well. Okay, so thank you. I'm glad we've already generated some good discussion. Now, I'm going to refer back to the lines as I go through. I guess you'll just watch me, but I'll read. So first off is, I'm going to point to the 6th line, when Eminem says, I just can't keep living this way. So I think what this speaks to is what we call in the terms of Aseres Meichuva, a cheshbon hanefesh, a self-analyzation. When Eminem is realizing that he's been living in a certain way, and it could be, in his case, taking drugs, or it could be anyone else falling into some negative midah, negative habit, something that he wants to correct, and trying to fix it. My Yeshiva, Moshe Zev Katzenstein, he says that around this time of year, every person should ask himself a few questions. And one of those questions are, what are my milos and what are my chesronos? What are my strong points? What do I do well? And what are my chesronos? What are the points that I'm somewhat lacking in? And how can I bolster the parts I'm doing well in and turn around or try to make some headway at the parts that I'm not as satisfied with? So when Eminem's saying, I can't just keep living this way, he's obviously spent some time thinking about the derech, the path that he's going on, and he feels that he doesn't want this path to continue the way it is. He wants to undergo some sort of a change. So stopping and thinking about the way one is doing, that is a major avoda of this time of year, of cheshbon and hanefesh, and this is one way that Eminem, in my opinion, succeeded by taking stock at where his life was going and trying to think about some changes. Now, when we do cheshbon and nefesh, sometimes we can ourselves help. We can by doing some sort of self-analysis and sitting down and thinking about how our life is, what our bein l'makom is going, between us and Hashem, bein adam l'chavero, between us and man, bein adam l'atmo, internal struggles within oneself, how a person is achieving in those areas. But it also sometimes can help to have a chaver, a friend, some sort of outside source, like the mashal of a mirror. When a person watches something in the mirror is a reflection of what he's looking like in front of it. But he needs that mirror to help show him some of his imperfections. Like, for example, if I'm shaving and I see a few spots on one side or on the other side, I may not be able to tell, but if I have a mirror, then the mirror will clearly identify what spots continue to need to be shaven. I wanted to bring out this point with a book that I was reading. I read the first few pages. It's as follows. It's called The Puppy Who Wanted a Boy. Usually a boy wants a puppy, but in this story, the puppy wanted a boy. And the first few pages, it's a dialogue between the puppy and his mother about trying to get a boy. So the dialogue is about how the puppy has been throughout the past year. And at one point, there's a discussion about frightening cats. And the puppy thinks that he hasn't frightened any cats over the past year. But then his mother speaks up, and I'll show the picture if you can see it. Here we have the puppy who's on top chasing the cat on the bottom. So even though the puppy himself may have forgotten about this incident, but his mother was able to remind him. This is some sort of external source being able to remind, in this case a puppy or a person, that they may not be on quite the top Spitz Madrega, the absolute highest level, as much as maybe they're striving for. And we have another example in the book, the next page, about eating shoes. The puppy also thinks he hasn't eaten any shoes until his mother tells him the following and shows him this picture. Like we can see on top, the puppy is eating the shoe. So sometimes a person can either forget or overlook or may not quite come to full realization of all of his actions, but if he has a friend or a spouse or a rabbi who can point out, or a rebbitzin who can point out what are some of the ways that he has been going, some ways he's doing well, some ways he can improve, then this may be able to be helpful for one's cheshbon nefesh around this time of year. Do we have any comments?
Very true. That makes a good relationship. Honesty and of love.
Thank you. And we can also, another benefit can be to be mechazik, and if someone else will be able to show, like, wow, this was such a great thing you did over the past year, you steiged so much, you really grew. It can also help for another person to not just point out the negative, but also the positive. Like I'll share a story that just happened with my Chaver Gedalia, who's on the phone right now, which is that I asked him a certain shaila about topics of emunah and bitachon, because that's a common theme we talk about. And before he answered the question, Gedalia pointed out that the fact that I was asking such a question shows that emunah and bitachon is something that matters to me and it's on my mind. And that was a very positive, helpful comment, and I really appreciated it. So sometimes a chaver or a spouse or someone external can provide positive reinforcement as well. Okay. Next up is the topic that we talked about in the introduction. On the 12th line, Eminem says, "It was my decision to come clean. I did it for me." And there's certainly a lot of milas for doing a tshuva for oneself. Like Mrs. Vestel said, because a person will be more motivated if he does it for himself. Gedalia also commented on this topic. And recently, or within the past year, I had a certain progression with regards to my schedule. And it was something that I wanted to change to have more consistency. And when I was speaking with my Yeshiva, Moshe Zev Katzenstein, he said that I shouldn't make a consistent schedule for anyone else, like for a chavrusa. Rather, I should make a consistent schedule because I'm too chashuv, I'm too much of a esteem to not have a schedule. I should do it for myself. And by doing it for myself, that will be the most motivated. On the other hand, I think that there is also room for doing it for other people, in addition. For example, if a person is part of a family, then the other people in the family will want to see the person succeed. It brings to mind another song, in which case a person describes shrechlach, like very terrible feelings that his family has towards him because of some bad actions that he did. And certainly a person chas v'shalom would not want to be in such a situation. So for some instances, if a person will turn himself around and become a productive person, then the other members of his family will look more positively towards him, a lot better relationship. Also, if a person views that he's one of the tzivos Hashem, that he's part of Hashem's team, then he'll be more likely to turn around, that Hashem wants him and needs him, that the Klal Yisrael needs him as a productive part of the Klal Yisrael. This could also be an added incentive to want to do well. When Rameir Shiva, when he gives a bracha to a bar mitzvah bacher, a boy who's becoming bar mitzvah, he says that Bez Hashem, you'll give nachas to your parents and to Hashem. So Rabbi Katzstein is pointing out that having some sort of a goal of giving nachas to external sources outside of oneself, namely one's parents and Hashem, that is some sort of a helpful and productive mechanism towards bolstering motivation. Do we have any comments on this point?
I was thinking, kind of when I think of rappers who talk about stuff like this, not to, generalize, but, well, about becoming sober. From what I've read, you have to do it for yourself. The people who try to do it for someone else generally fail. I mean, it can be the reason to start, but if you're going to succeed, it has to be for yourself. Otherwise, it's very unlikely. So it could be similar to.
Dad, if you have any comments, you're welcome to say even though you're in person. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor, for your comment about doing it for oneself. That still is the ikr, the primary motivation. Okay.
You probably got a lot of pressure from friends and family all along, for quite a bit of time. You're going to pressure me to go into rehab, and then he finds I'm not doing it for any of them, just doing it for myself finally.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Unison.
I used to take a particular client to AA meetings for a year. I did every week, and we would hear stories of how families were just destroyed by this person's alcohol past. And it finally got to them that they were losing their spouse, they were losing their job, they were losing people respecting them, and so they started coming. That was, they each had their own straw that broke the camel's back, which led them to come to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Thank you. I'm hopeful that we're not just externalizing this message and just applying it to someone who's over-intoxicated on drugs or alcohol, because I think a main point that I'm trying to bring out is that this could apply to any negative midah. We spoke about last time on the Sefer Torah about the inyan of Kiddush Hashem. And the way a person makes a Kiddush Hashem, one of the ways is that he's dibur b'nachas u'mabrias, he has pleasant conversation with people, and he's noseh v'nosim b'emunah, he deals honestly in business, and he learns Torah, wearing talis and tefillin. So if a person is lacking in these areas, if a person has some sort of negative midas, this could also potentially be some sort of a strain or difficulty on interpersonal relationships. Like Chazal say that Tamid Chacham are margim shalom ba'olam, and one of the ways is because Torah machir b'mensch, Torah changes the person and makes the person a more pleasant person to interact with and to deal with. So the more we learn and the more we perfect our midas, then the more our bein anal l'chaveiro and our interactions with our fellow man and including family will be much improved. The next point I'd like to talk about is on the 7th line. Eminem says, "So starting today, I'm breaking out of this cage." I want to emphasize the word today. Now, it seems like those in the audience are more familiar with the mechanisms of rehab than I am, but one thing I've heard is that if a person feels or takes the approach of like, I'm going to take one last cigarette today, but tomorrow I'm going to stop. Or a person says, if a person's doing for a chas like a virus with technology, a person say, I'm going to do the Savera one more time, but tomorrow I'm going to stop. Such a person is not likely to ever stop, because they haven't finally said, today I'm stopping, no more. This is one area that I think is a major step that Eminem did. He said, starting today, I'm not doing any more of this negative behavior, not one more time, and he's going to stand up and stop doing it. I'll share a story from when I was in yeshiva in Or Sameach Monsey. One of the Bachrim, for some reason he had this dialogue in person with one of the Rebbeim, official Becher, and he was talking about a certain Aveira that he was doing actually with technology, and the Bacher was saying, should I like curtail it or only do it a little bit or not as long? And the Rabbi Becher, he said, you have to fight every single time and try not to do it at all in the future. I think there are different opinions on this, but this is what a Rebbeim took on, that if a person has some negative action that he's doing, then he has to try to take it on full force, not do it again. On the flip side, those who learn Chafetz Chaim are familiar with the programs that suggest being makbid, being careful not to speak Lashon Hara, for example, for 10 minutes a day, for example, from 5 p.m. to 5:10 p.m., and that's a way to slowly start improving. So I think there are different methods on this, but Eminem's, I think his point of starting today, that as opposed to starting tomorrow or some nebulous time in the future, is a valid approach. Because I'll say, if not now, then when? So if a person say, I'm doing tomorrow, on one hand, that is a definitive time, tomorrow, but on the other hand, tomorrow could always just be pushed off to another tomorrow, as opposed to today, in which case there's no more. Do we have any comments?
It's easy to push things off and think that it will somehow be easier to do it tomorrow. I did that with dieting. And it's just easier to say, yeah, it's that willpower that I don't have now, that will come tomorrow, right? If you think about it logically, there's no reason it doesn't think it will come tomorrow if it's something that you have to make a change, you have to do that. I can give a very practical example, normally. I heard recently on the radio that PFAS, which are the chemicals that are called the forever chemicals, that are in clothes and cosmetics and however, are in certain glosses that gloss our teeth with. And I found out it was the name of the one that I use, my husband uses. So I went online and I found out a brand that doesn't have PFAS. And I ordered it for us. It's called Reach, R-E-A-C-H. But I used that Glide one, the bad one Glide one more time until it came in the mail. You know, I just had that urge once to block my teeth. Because I said to myself rationally, well, I've been using it for years. What's one more time? Right. But I did put an end to it because I did have an alternative. That's much easier than changing our diet. So I did that when I started thinking something. It was just, a decision I had made, and I didn't falter in it. But we're all different in different times of our lives.
So I'll respond to both of those comments. First comment was about, by Mrs. Mayer, about whether the motivation will come tomorrow. And I do think that there is some place for starting sometime in the future. For example, a perfect example is right now. If a person says, I want to start learning, for example, Sefer Chafetz Chaim. I want to start learning 5 minutes a day. But right now, there's just a lot going on. It's the Aseret Tshuva. Then it's going to be Yom Kippur, Sukkot. I want to start after Sukkot. Now, if there's some real aspect that might provide that there will be more menuchas hanefesh, more room and headspace in the future, not some distant time like when I get married or when my kids are out of the house, but some concrete time that will happen and will very likely have more menuchas hanefesh, I think it is appropriate to consider waiting to begin a project until the person has a full ground running, and when he has more menuchas nefesh and is more able to focus on what he's doing. And then, so my mother said, I'm not coming to criticize the usage of one extra time of floss, but I'm coming to talk about in general with regards to feeling of doing something wrong one more time, is that if a person realizes that every mitzvah and on the flip side, every avera has nitzlius, has eternal ramifications, then even one time or one small bracha, or one small action, one small bad word, or on the flip side, one bracha with kavanah, or one positive word, can have tremendous ramifications in the future for oneself, for one's generations, as well as in the Olam Ha'emes, in the next world. And then this will be a motivator to a person that even a small action or a small change is worth being makbid on, is worth being particular about, even in a small situation.
There's two ways of looking at this. One is that, the concrete behavior, like, okay, I'm not going to do this floss, I'm going to do that floss. And, that's something that you just said a date. Okay, starting now, I'm going to do that. But there are a lot of things when it comes to behavior or behavioral change. Something like that's a very concrete thing. But when there are things like behavioral changes, I think rather than actually setting a date, or you could set a date, but that sometimes you have to gradually, you start by taking one step at a time, and you take small steps, like what it could be weight loss, or go, you say, okay, I want to lose 50 pounds. You can't lose 50 pounds, but you can lose 1 pound at a time by starting correctly, by practicing. So, and I think it's like that with needles also. You can't say one day, okay, now I'm going to start talking like an hour. It's too big a goal. It has to be broken down into smaller steps that you start gradually. Exercise, eating, and you start doing small steps until you realize it. And sometimes they say, fake it till you make it. But you start in small steps, heading in the direction you want to go, and then you start to feel that, Hashem is helping you and He's going along with you because you've started, and now you can continue going in that direction rather than saying, today I'm this, and tomorrow I'm that. But go, and then sometimes you don't even realize that you're on the right path until you turn around and you look and you think, wow, that's where I was, and here I am now, and it's far from there. I've gone on this journey, and I look at, wow, I started just one step, but now I've grown. Now I've come far, just by doing tiny little steps in that direction. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Mrs. Vassell, for your comment about the importance of breaking tshuva into a small step. And hopefully we will talk about this more in the future as we progress today.
Sometimes it's very hard to give up some things you love doing, even though they're bringing you, particularly like if you're an overeater and you love junk food and you know it's really damaging you. So what do you say? I like that one last Tuesday of the weekend. I'll start Monday. Almost everybody says it's late. It's not a Monday. So they can do the last binge.
That's why they yo-yo
Thank you, Mrs. Rudenstein, Mrs. Purcell, for your comments about about either weaning down what one does or somehow not making it be that I'll just do it on Monday. I do want to point out that there is a difference between overeating and something that's inherently ruchnius, like a mitzvah or an avera, because unhealthy food is kosher. And if a person eats some unhealthy food in a moderate amount, then it's generally not terrible for a person. If he binges and eats a lot, then it could lead to problems. But I think you may have to make a chiluk between something that's absolutely harmful for a person's neshama, like an avera, versus unhealthy food, which in moderation could be okay and just is worthwhile to curtail and not allowed to get out of control.
I think that's one of the things that can make food issues harder to deal with than other problems, is that you're taking a huge tool out of the toolbox. The tool being abstention. You can't not eat. You have to eat. And in a balanced diet, I can go very, very, very strict. Like, there are people who are really strict about, only eating very specific things and weighing their food, and that's great. I really admire people who do that. I'm not one of them. But, it's hard because you can't, okay, I just won't have that many carbs. I just won't do this. And it just makes it that much harder, I think, than things that you can, you don't need lots of carbs to survive. There's a Yetzer Hara that says, that makes it really tempting if you want to do this, but you're not going to die if you can't do lots of carbs. You can't survive without food. So it's very hard to do that. Moderation is, I think, harder than objective.
God forbid, sometimes you have to get a scare.
Of course. Nobody wants to get to that point. But, yeah.
My dad had that scare in 1974. He had a clot. He was rushed to the hospital. The doctor said, "You're very close. It didn't go to your heart." And he lost 100 pounds after that. He had been very heavy. There was a family friend, also I think in the 70s, 3 pack a day, filterless camel. He had a major heart attack. Lucky he came through, he quit cold turkey. But we don't want to get to the point of eating,
My mother's parents were both smokers. The doctor told them when they were in their 50s, you need to stop. My grandmother stopped. My grandfather died of esophageal cancer 15 years later. I mean,
he didn't stop or he had to stop. No.
he stopped the year he was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. So it's, and I don't think it was a character thing. In the case of nicotine, I don't know, but it seems to me that it's incredibly addictive stuff. So,
Yeah.
if you start when you're a kid, like 8 or 9 years old, it's really hard to stop.
Okay, the next topic I'd like to discuss is, on the 5th line, Eminem says as follows: "I'm not alone." It says not alone, and Mrs. Purcell suggested that maybe maybe Mrs. Rudenstein suggested that maybe he's talking about that Hashem is with him. So I'm not coming to analyze whether Eminem was saying that he's not alone because Hashem is with him, but this is an important factor when a person is doing tshuva to feel like Hashem is with him. Chazal say that if a person would try to tackle the Yetzer Hara alone, would try to take on the Yetzer Hara by himself, he would not be successful. A person needs Hashem's help for it to succeed. Chazal say that if a person opens a hole of iron, the Yomar Shiva says it, if he opens up a hole of iron, then Hashem will open up a hole much bigger for him. So a person needs Siyata D'Shmaya, needs Hashem's help in order for him to succeed.
You're not looking at us anywhere. Are you aware of that? It looked like you were going to your left.
Okay, and the next topic is on the 11th line. Eminem says as follows: "It's time to put my life back together right now." He says it's time to put my life back together right now. So what exactly does this look like, that his life is back together? Does he have a clear vision of what his life is going to look like? Because I think the more clear that a person has a vision of what what that future goal is going to look like, what his bein adam l'makom is going to be, his bein adam l'chavero, bein adam l'matzmo, what his overall interactions are going to be. The more clear he has a vision of what it's going to look like, I think the more motivation he'll have in order to stay with conviction for his goals. Okay, now I'd like to talk about that's what I would say as far as his present resolution. Now I'd like to talk about some future concerns that he might face. On the third and fourth line he says, so just walk this road together through the storm in any weather, cold or warm. Eminem realizes that this road is not going to be an easy road. There's going to be a storm. There's going to be some sort of external pressure to move off of what his conviction is. It's going to be cold or warm. Sometimes it's going to be cold. He's going to feel alone. He's going to feel by himself. Sometimes it's going to be warm. He may have external pressure from people bringing him in and trying to encourage him to move off of his path. So Eminem is realizing that there are going to be some challenges in the future, but he has conviction that he's going to stay with it. Now, I'd like to talk about what are some of the ways that he's going to maintain his conviction. The main way that he suggests is that he's going to have friends. And in the discussion earlier, we spoke about this. On the third line, he says, so just walk this road together. Seems like there's going to be other people walking this road with him. Eminem is being mechaven to what the Mishnah says. Knei lecha chaver. A person should acquire for himself a friend. If a person has a friend, the Maharsh Shiva says, a friend will give him encouragement along the way and will help him out. It's a different role than a Rebbe. A Rebbe is going to give him guidance, but Eminem is focused on that he's going to have friends who are going to help him out. And when he has friends who are going to help him out, then he'll have some sort of positive reinforcement and he'll be able to stay with his conviction in the future.
Sort of a beautiful poem, and what you're talking about, it's two sets of footprints in the desert, and then all of a sudden there's one set of footprints. And the man is saying, I had such a hard time, Hashem, and you were right with me, but when it got even worse, I was alone. It was just my own footprint. And Hashem said, I was carrying you then. So maybe walk this road together. Maybe Eminem was saying, God is with me. And then we'll do this road. It could be that or opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, the next topic I'd like to talk about is something, this is a small nakuda, a small point, but I think it could be worth pointing out. On the 8th line, Eminem says, I'm standing up, I'm going to face my demons. He says he's going to face his demons. Maharsh Shiva of Kazakhstan, he says, the most effective way to fight the Yetzer Hara is not by doing hand-to-hand combat head-on, by trying to stand in the place of Nisayah, in the place of battle, and trying to overcome. Rather, the best way to overcome the Yetzer Hara is to distance oneself from the Yetzer Hara, to stay far away. For example, if a person has certain nisyonos with technology, so he should put a filter on his computer, and by that way he won't be compelled to stumble over what he's been in the past. If a person is around other people who are negative influence on him, so instead of trying to be with those people and not be negatively influenced, just try if possible to stay away from those people. So Eminem says, I'm going to face my demons, but I'm suggesting it may be a more appropriate, more fitting approach if he tries to run away or be in a different room or be somehow far away from that which was causing him issues in the past.
Can I just ask, if someone tells you to look in a different direction,
Mom, this is how I do it. Now the next topic is on the 11th line. Eminem says, "It's time to put my life back together right now." So what does Eminem mean that he's planning on putting his life back together right now? Does he mean that there's going to be an immediate fix? That all of a sudden everything is going to be perfect? That he's going to be a totally changed person overnight? As Mrs. Vestel pointed out earlier, that this is a long road. It takes a long time. Or could it mean maybe he's saying, right now I'm going to start putting my life back together, but of course it's going to take a long time. But certainly for a person to feel that this is going to take a long time, there's many avodas that are a lifetime avoda that take a long time. The Gemara says the main purpose of life is to fix one mitzvah. That takes a full lifetime. So if a person feels, I'm going to start right now, but it'll take a long time, that's a balanced approach. But if he feels like, I'm going to start right now, and it's going to be accomplished and finished right now, then it could be that somewhat unrealistic.
Today, like that concept of taking action today, would that be like trying to put my life together right now, like he's going to start?
Okay. Okay. Now, I'll mention a couple things that it looks like I would suggest to Eminem that he would add to his tshuva repertoire. One is he doesn't make any mention of a rebbe or a rabbi giving him some sort of advice or concrete steps. The Mishnah says, "Aseh lecha rav," make for yourself a rabbi. And even though Eminem, it's very clear he's motivated, he wants to turn his life around, but he doesn't have any specific direction or concrete steps given from a person. He has his friends who are going to walk his road together, but he doesn't have a mentor or a rabbi or someone who's going to give him concrete steps. This is why it's important for a person to have some sort of a rebbe or rabbi or rav to give concrete steps. A person could want to do tshuva, want to make steps and growth, but unless a person has some sort of direction that's given by a rebbe or rabbi that will help him out, then he may not end up accomplishing the most. He needs some sort of concrete direction to direct his proper motivation.
Do you think, Yoni, when he said I have to face my demons, that he had a lot of stress going up, or traumas, or things that bothered him so deeply? It almost sounds like he's going to get help. I'm not necessarily already, from a psychiatric point of view, psychology. What would help him face his demons?
Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Thank you, Mrs. Rudenheim, for suggesting that it could be that faces demons means he has to face some things that happened to him in the past in order for him to overcome it. Now,
I have the advantage of being able to see the words, so I can look back. But he said, the last line of the chorus is, I'm not alone, but the last line of the body is, I was my decision, I did it for me. So I was wondering, as I'm reading through this again, it doesn't sound like he has anybody with him, except for that line, I'm not alone. I mean, he does say to just walk this road together through the storm, but it's not like it's just everybody. It's like a generic. It's not, he seems extremely alone, even though he says he's not alone. In fact, just reading this as a poem, which I guess I am because I don't know the song. It would seem that he is really alone, and he is doing this for himself while alone, which is got to be an extraordinarily scary thing. I mean, for us, whenever we try to do something, we do our tshuva, we have someone to talk to, we have someone to bounce our ideas off of, we have someone to, I really had a problem with, with Lashon Hara, have our group of people, we'll have it again, so we can say, I came up with this situation, it was really hard. It's much easier to do this in a community. This just seems extremely frightening. As if I'm just reading this, again, as a poem. To face your demons and to do all this alone.
right, so therefore it does help to have some sort of a friend circle, like he mentions in the chorus. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, something I want to talk about is that right now, Eminem is very motivated. He has all this strong language like, I'm manning up, I'm going to hold my ground. But what's going to be in the future if his conviction wanes? It's true he has his friends who maybe are going to help him out, but does Eminem have any sort of future reminder that's going to help him out? Rav Chaim Shmulevitz brings down the Gemara brings down from Tanakh, the story, the way my Chav Elchanan Gerkel, who I want to actually thank for helping me prepare this year, Elchanan told me it was Michal's second husband who was usher to her, who was prohibited to her. So what he did is that he had a lot of resolution to not be with her, so he put a sword in the ground. And that sword, if Chaim Shmulevitz says, is gonna, not that he's always gonna have as much conviction as he did originally to not be with her, but that the sword would remind him of that initial conviction, and therefore it would be effective in helping him retain what he initially wanted to do. Does Eminem have anything like a sword in the ground, any sort of reminder, any sort of statement, any sort of learning of Musar, or writing down his comments that he's going to revisit, that he's going to review, some way that he's going to be a reminder to his initial conviction? Or is it on his conviction is just going to fade away as time goes on? What is Eminem going to do to retain his conviction? One thing that same I mentioned earlier, Official Becher, he once mentioned, he quoted this Gemara, and he was saying to the Olam in Or Sameach that he was very inspired by a certain thing that the Or Sameach group was doing, or the Bachim were doing. And in that speech, he was also talking about how you have to retain conviction. You can't just let it slip away. So I asked Rabbi Becher, Rabbi, what are you doing to make sure this inspiration that you got from the Or Sameach Bachim doesn't just slip away? And he answered, he said, I spoke about it. So it could be, if we learn from this lesson from my Rabbi Becher, that just by speaking about something is a way of concretizing one's feelings. Certainly Eminem rapping about it, making a whole song about it, could be that is an effective way towards reminding himself of his initial conviction, even though certainly he can look back at his song, but it seems like even just the act of speaking about something is a way of concretizing one's conviction.
We learned that in Prophet Chaim class. When you hear it with a friend, your decision to change, to do something a different way, a better way, it cements it more, makes it more real. Because you're almost like making the vows in front of this person that this is the change you're going to make in yourself. And your friend could know in your mind to help you with.
So Mom, what you're suggesting is that by telling another person this is what's going to be a helpful reminder, and that other person can remind you. So in this case, it's better than writing down in a journal, which is just between a person and himself. When a person shares with another friend, then there's more hischayvus, more of an obligation to carry through with it, more so than just writing down in a journal.
Yeah, I think it takes more courage to admit and to tell someone your plan to make it better. But journal writing is the first step. We talked about it.
Also, when they speak of like the path to Teshuva, they always say, speak out your problem, speak it out. Even if it's just to yourself, but get the words out. It makes a much more impression on your mind than just thinking about it all the time.
Or if you write it on a piece of paper, you can put it up on a wall, on a river.
Okay, or I mean that is one of the halachas of vidui, is that vidui should be spoken out, which is what we do on Yom Kippur when we do the confession. Okay, well, I just want to mention in closing that we say in the Aseres Mechuvah, Zachrein l'chayim melech hafetz b'chayim, Hashem is a king who is chafetz b'chaim, who desires life. Hashem doesn't want us to chas v'shalom suffer negative things, negative repercussions. Hashem wants us to look within ourselves, do tshuva, do cheshbon nefesh, think about the way we're going, increase on what we're doing well,